Hello and welcome to a Monday Night Football AFC East Showdown breakdown show. My name is Adam Levitan. As always, joined by Cody Main and Gary Hartman here. We are coming off of a night, Cody, in which a defense broke the slate, in which I'm not sure I've ever seen a defense break a slate before. The Cowboys went for a 30-ball plus against the Giants last night. We'll talk about that a little bit here. How's it going today, Cody?
Yeah, fortunately, this is a forward-thinking show. It was 37 points, and I think the highest DST scoring output in certainly in my database, and since I've been playing Showdown. So hopefully, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers can put a few more points on the board than Daniel Jones did last night.
Yes, was not a good performance for Gary's Giants. How's it going today, Gary?
Yeah, I've been much better. I'm here to talk about the future. And yesterday sucked, but onward and upward.
The thing about these showdown slates that's been happening is cheap tight end has been absolutely smashing. Defense at times has smashed, and kicker at times has smashed. I think, Cody, it's causing people to think about doing some really weird things like kicker captains and defense captains and playing a ton of dust ball tight ends on these narratives here. Any macro thoughts on the defense, the kicker, the dusty tight end stuff in Showdown?
Yeah, I think part of it's pricing related, but I do think the field in a macro sense is becoming a little bit too reactionary. And I think we'll probably see it carry over a little bit tonight. The DSTs are both very cheap tonight as well. We've got a couple of cheap options in play, one of which will be a cheap tight end. And I think just from like a base projection standpoint, these types of plays continue to funnel into optimized lineups. And it's not necessarily wrong by any stretch, but I do think we're getting to a point where some of these outcomes are being a little bit overplayed. DSTs last night, you think about all the options we had on last night's slate from a ceiling perspective. We had Saquon and Pollard and CeeDee Lamb and Dak and Daniel Jones, all of these options, and we still saw 3 to 4 to 5% captain ownership on both DSTs. So it's something that I do think is going to end up being a little bit overplayed going forward. Certainly they make sense in the flex spots most often, and certainly they make sense in the right type of game scripts that you're playing for. But again, we're chasing these huge right tails, and for the Cowboys to go out and put up 37 DraftKings points on defense was one of those right tails. Just not something that I'm generally going to be playing for. So trying to stick to kind of the stuff that I have been playing historically and some of the stuff that I think is going to win more often. And especially on a slate like tonight, that's going to be at the wide receiver and quarterback position. I'll let everyone else chase the defensive scoring.
Yeah, I did want to point out on this chart here, I mean, Steph Diggs has like the flattest chart I've ever seen. I mean, he's just all over the place in terms of his percentile outcomes. Thought that was at least worth noting, whereas you'd think that Gabe Davis was more like that, but no, Gabe Davis has way more games here on the left side, as you see a little bump there. As a macro for this game, overall on this game, Gary, my thought was that the Jets have a very, very good chance to win this game. I mean, I think people underestimate how good Jets defense is. They gave Josh Allen all kinds of problems last year. They gave Steph Diggs all kinds of problems last year. Now they get a more stable offense. Hopefully we'll talk about Aaron Rodgers here in a second, but a more stable offense to kind of get them through some of these games. So I think the Jets have a very, very, very good chance to win this game. And I think it could be another ugly one. We saw outlier low touchdowns scored for a week one yesterday. It would surprise me if this game turned into a shootout. I am expecting Aaron Rodgers to play very, very slow. Any overall thoughts on the game here, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, the level of excitement from Jets fans in this area is through the roof. I think everyone I know that's a Jets fan is going to this game tonight, and everyone feels disrespected that they're home dogs. So I agree with you. I think they have a real chance to win here. And I think there's ways to get unique with lineups. You can see right there with like Jets onslaughts, or even if you want to go 4-2 Jets, that I think the field will not approach. So I expect a more competitive game than last night at MetLife Stadium, although home dog, 45.5 over under. Starting to get a little flashbacks to 24 hours ago. But I think it's going to be a much more exciting game.
Yeah, and you see the one that sticks out here, Cody, is 1 Bill, 5 Jets is not going to be owned whatsoever. If you think the Bills can come out and absolutely smash, that's an interesting one. Also, 4 Jets, 2 Bills, only 14.5%. Any thoughts on the constructions for tonight?
Yeah, you mentioned one point that I think will be one to keep an eye on throughout the show is that the Jets profile to play pretty slow. They played pretty slow. Rodgers played pretty slow under Nathaniel Hackett in Green Bay, and they played pretty slow in the preseason, a point that Silva pointed out in his matchups column. And so even in games where like the Jets do win outright, I think you could see more play volume from the Bills. Generally, the way that they play on offense is going to lead to more fantasy production for more players. So I think even in outcomes where the Bills lose, you can still see some 5-1 Bills get there, assuming just a majority of the production funnels through one player on the Jets side. So I'm not just reserving my 5-1 Bills onslaughts to games where I think they absolutely crush.
By the way, our optimal right now is a 5-1 Bills. And you can see here that if you are willing to play Deontay Hardy at 200, you can do almost anything that you want. And so that's a unique part of the slate. We'll get into Deontay Hardy more here in a second. But yeah, these are the optimals by the solver, which, by the way, you can check out the link in the description below. If you do sign up for Solver, auto sync our projections. Just be sure you use the same email as your ETR email. Anyways, going to quarterback here, I do think that the Josh Allen stuff is super interesting. He struggled massively as a thrower last year against the Jets, and I don't think that was a coincidence. Jets have an awesome secondary, can certainly rush the passer. However, the reason Josh Allen is so valuable in fantasy is because he was still able to get there in those games via his legs. Now, if this was like a full slate, a 13-game slate like yesterday, I would not be interested in playing Josh Allen at an elevated price. We have to realize that even if we don't think Josh Allen has a very good game here, he's still very likely to be in the optimal because you're only comparing him to other people in the game. And so 84% total ownership on Josh Allen actually sounds a bit right to me here. Cody, what do you think about handling Josh Allen tonight?
Yeah, this is another problem. And part of it is just week one pricing. Part of it is some of the cheap skill position players that DraftKings has yet to see yet. And we're projecting them for as many or more points than players that are $2,000, $3,000 more expensive than them. So you're seeing this stars and scrubs style approach from Thursday night carried over last night. And we're going to see it again tonight with Deontay Hardy. And part of that is really going to push up that Josh Allen ownership, both in the captain spot and in total. Wouldn't be surprised by the time we get to lock if we're looking at a situation again like we saw with Mahomes Thursday night where it's 90% plus and closer to 30% at captain. For cash games, it's certainly right. He is one of the more underpriced players. I know that sounds crazy to say at 11.4. He should probably be closer to 12.4. And I think of any of the true studs on the slate between him, Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, and Stephon Diggs, he's certainly the guy that becomes the cash game captain lock. I think the more interesting discussion with Josh Allen is when we get to tournaments and when we start to think about how to pair him up. You mentioned how difficult the Jets defense was for him to pass against the last two meetings. You also have very common combinations with captain Josh Allen. You're going to see a lot of Josh Allen plus Diggs and Hardy. You're going to see a lot of Josh Allen plus Hardy. So I think thinking through those in tournaments is just is one way to get unique with him, including some of these mid-priced players that might get squeezed out as a result of the stars and scrubs construction. But I agree with you. I think the 84% is maybe even a touch light. And if it holds around there, for my builds, it's going to end up being a little bit closer to 100%. And I think I'm going to ultimately end up overweight at captain as well. He's just such a unicorn for Showdown.
Right, exactly. And yeah, I would be playing Josh Allen, maybe not in captain, and I would try to find ways around that if I didn't want to play Josh Allen in captain. But I do think that he is going to be in all of them for me. Now, I think DK brings up a good point. They're going to mute Dig and Gabe Davis. Hopefully, if you're a Jet or a Jets fan, does that mean we see success for tight end and slot wide receiver? The problem is that they do not have much beyond Diggs and Gabe Davis, right? We're going to talk about Deontay Hardy, plenty. Trent Sherfield is in the mix also, but I think Dalton Kincaid, we're going to talk about too, Dawson Knox as well. I think those are all interesting stacking options there. You're going to be leaving a ton of money if you don't play Diggs and Gabe Davis with this, but we'll talk about that more in a second. Here we get to wide receiver. On the other side, Gary, you know what you need from Aaron Rodgers. You need a lot of touchdowns because he's not going to give you anything with his legs. He's going to play slow. It's unlikely he goes nuclear like 350 plus. You're going to need 2 or 3 touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers. That would be on a main slate. On Showdown, though, maybe 15 points is good enough from Aaron Rodgers, though. So what do you think about him tonight?
Yeah, and hopefully my mic sounds a little better. I know I was having issues. I disconnected and reconnected. Hopefully you guys are okay. Rodgers, the ownership seems pretty efficient to me. I think kind of what Cody and I have been speaking about the last couple of slates, this looks like a classic. If I want some leverage on Aaron Rodgers, I'll get it in the captain spot. Because if he explodes, I'm expecting 300 yards, 3+ touchdowns. The Jets script is positive in that one, and I want him in the captain in all likelihood. If it's not him in those Jets kind of win/have a dynamic offense scenario, it's probably Garrett Wilson. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I don't have an issue with it. Obviously, I think Allen, I'm with you guys on in that no matter how you look at this game going, I think Josh Allen makes sense in almost every single lineup, because if they're playing from behind and you like this Jets team to win, then he's got to be doing some more things through the air with his legs, etc. And if you like the Bills, then you probably want him at least, in the flex, probably in the captain spot more often. So I think cash games, Cody, correct me if I'm wrong, you're looking at both quarterbacks probably appearing despite all the dynamic skill position guys we have in this game. And Rodgers just seems efficient to me. If I came in under, it would be in flex ownership, but I don't mind getting a little bit over in captain. In his first game in MetLife, he'll be pumped up. I could see him kind of trying to play maybe a little bit faster than we expected from Rodgers.
Question at quarterback here from Troy on FanDuel. If you play Josh Allen, your MVP, can you still play Jets defense in one of your lineups? What do you think about that one, Cody?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the levers that you have to pull in order to try and find ways to get unique on FanDuel specifically, but also on DraftKings too. And not in all outcomes, but at least in some outcomes, the Josh Allen plus Jets D is positively correlated. If Josh Allen goes out and throws a pick six on the opening drive, that's generally going to end up being a good thing for your quarterback. Now, you hope your quarterback isn't named Daniel Jones, but theoretically, you then get a negative script immediately, and Josh Allen is forced to do more with his arm and with his legs right off the bat, and that generally ends up being a good thing for both parties.
Running back is super interesting here. I want to start on the Jets side. So we know that Breece Hall is coming off of an ACL. We know that Dalvin Cook's coming off of a shoulder issue. Breece Hall, they've been talking plenty about easing in. The reports are that Dalvin Cook will get the quote-unquote bulk of the carries. I do think that Breece Hall is an awesome pass catcher and will be used in that role. I do think they think Breece Hall is reasonably healthy. We saw Javonte Williams get a reasonable amount of work yesterday. Certainly P. Ryan played plenty. Also, Gary, what do you think about the split between Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, and we are projecting Michael Carter to mix in a little bit here tonight?
Yeah, potentially the decision point of the slate if one of these guys gets here. And we really don't know what they're going to do. We expect them to ease Breece Hall back in. That's kind of the thesis behind the Dalvin Cook signing, right? You have Breece Hall as fresh as possible down the stretch. Dalvin Cook's on a one-year deal. They paid him. There's no reason to not give him volume, assuming he's game ready. A little bit cheaper as well. Then again, as a GPP guy, knowing the ceiling that Breece Hall has, the home run hitting ability that Breece Hall has, and the less ownership, that'd be the kind of guy I try to squeeze in, I think, in my tournament lineups first. Dalvin Cook may be more of the cash play for me. And then I think Michael Carter is actually super interesting because he's priced at a place where you're not going to take him because there's plenty of like 800 and lower type of guys tonight. And if there's ever a week where the third running back sprinkles in more for the Jets, you got to imagine it's week one where both of the top two running backs didn't get as much work in the camp and in preseason as before. I think they trust Michael Carter to be out there on passing downs. Maybe he gets a little bit more work than normal and just kind of hey, punt it and let's give it a shot at 4% ownership type play. So I'm probably max one of this group, Cody, just because of all of the skill position guys we have tonight. I know that's not usually how strict we want to get on Showdown, but I doubt I see two of these guys get in. But I'm curious your guys' takes on these Jets backs.
Well, one thing I'd say is that Aaron Rodgers historically has been very good for the running back position, and whether that's him, audibling to the right stuff or checking down at the right times, he has been very, very good for fantasy production for the running back position. I'm not sure I would limit it to just one of these guys. I think they will use both of them, especially with the state of their wide receiver position, which we'll get to in a second here. So I think I'd be okay playing two of these guys in certain builds. Cody, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think somebody else brought it up. This is a secondhand point that I'm stealing, but is it possible that we could just see this backfield replicate something? I hate to keep doing the Packers stuff here, but is it possible we could just see this backfield replicate something like we saw with what they did with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones during Rodgers' time there? And in those instances, you're looking at generally Aaron Jones would be, 11K plus, and A.J. Dillon would maybe be in that 5 to 6K range. So cumulatively, you're spending about the same amount as you would if they split the work up that way. For me, I think it's still probably a Doc situation if you have one of them in the captain spot. So, if captain Dalvin, Doc, Breece Hall, I would want to try and limit that as much as possible, even if it isn't happening naturally. But I think I'd still allow it a little bit.
Okay. On the other side, it's also interesting because there was a ton of fantasy hype around James Cook. Now, we are concerned that James Cook is not going to get goal line work. Maybe they don't see him as a workhorse. I think that it's going to depend on how he plays. If he comes out and he's playing really well, I could see him consolidating some. I mean, we saw Brian Robinson consolidate 20 out of 24 running back touches yesterday. We saw Kenny Gainwell go out and consolidate the touches for Philly. If anyone consolidates here, I think it will be James Cook. Now, we don't have a great projection on James Cook because we are giving both Damian Harris and Latavius Murray work, and we're specifically giving goal line work to Damian Harris. We saw in the preseason, they take James Cook off the field, put Damian Harris in for goal line carry. That said, man, I still think that James Cook has the best chance here for a big game. Damian Harris at 9% does strike me as interesting, though. Cody, any thoughts here on Bills' backfield?
Yeah, I'm going to steal Gary's point here again, because this is a spot where I feel like if I get buried by James Cook, he's going to bury me in such a way that he pushes to be the slate's top overall scorer. I have serious concerns about how many opportunities he's going to get in the red zone and near the goal line. Not only is he going to compete with Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, he's also going to have to compete with Josh Allen for those rushing opportunities when they get in close. But James Cook is explosive. And I know Silva pointed out that Josh Allen doesn't target the running back position very frequently historically. That actually jumped quite a bit last season. I think it jumped quite a bit last season, at least in part because James Cook was there, much better pass catcher than the types of backs that Josh Allen had previously worked with. So I do think there's some upside. I just think that at 8K, if we get that type of game from James Cook, it's more likely to end up being in the captain position than it is in flex. I think the 35% where we're looking at it in flex seems about right. And then looking at the captain ownership, I think there's chances that he really blows that out of the water.
I mean, the pivot is obviously Damian Harris, talented NFL runner, has often been injured, is not dynamic. In other words, he runs it between the tackles. He runs it well there, but multiple touchdown game is at least in the bag for Damian Harris there. I think he's ahead of Latavius Murray. There's been speculation from Joe Biscaglia of The Athletic that Latavius Murray is pushing for that role. I still think it'll be Damian Harris, but that's what the field thinks. Also, at least in terms of price, not in terms of ownership, but at least in terms of price, Damian Harris would be kind of a pay up to be contrarian. Hope you get 2 touchdown kind of play.
Yeah. The only thing I want to add in on that is, and I know someone mentioned in chat, Thorman's rankings, Jets D-line 5th, Bills O-line 18th. I think they might prioritize the pass protecting running back tonight, depending on how game script goes. I think James Cook is capable there, but I know there was a quote from Ken Dorsey like 2 weeks ago that they want to see him improve even more in pass protection. Damian Harris, I know, going back to his time on New England, was someone that the Patriots always did trust in that role. Just, something to consider tonight, depending on how this game is going.
Fair points. Okay. I'm going to include tight end here at the wide receiver position also, and just go with pass catcher here because I think it's important on the Dalton Kincaid point. We know it's a difficult matchup for Steph Diggs. We know it's a difficult matchup for Gabe Davis. Can they still get there? Yes, undoubtedly. However, it's certainly a better spot, I think, for Knox, Kincaid, Hardy, Sherfield. We'll see on Shakir if he's even going to play very much. I want to note 2 things. Deontay Hardy was the only wide receiver to really play in the slot in the preseason. Trent Sherfield looked more like the backup to Diggs and Gabe Davis on the outside. Is that sticky to the regular season? We'll see. I actually think Trent Sherfield can play a little bit, and I would not be opposed to taking shots in large field on Trent Sherfield whatsoever. At the tight end spot, when Dawson Knox and Kincaid played together in the preseason, we saw Dawson Knox have that base role, and Dalton Kincaid only played 60-something% of the snaps, ran a route around there too. Certainly not elite, but I think they are going to use him in the clear pass-catching stuff. Dalton Kincaid had so much buzz in the season-long streets, Cody. I feel like people are going to want to come out and play him here tonight, especially because everybody knows it's a tough matchup for Diggs and Gabe. So how are you thinking about Bills pass catchers?
Yeah, I think DraftKings did a pretty good job of pricing here, save for Stephon Diggs kind of clearing as the obvious wide receiver one and maybe slightly underpriced. I don't think too many people are going to be worried about the Sauce Gardner matchup and the tough perimeter defense of the Jets as it relates to Stephon Diggs. I do think we'll see that play itself out with Gabe Davis. And right now we have 27.9% projected total ownership, 5.0% captain ownership. And as it relates to this room, I think we're going to see those mid-tier guys, specifically Davis and Dawson Knox, who wasn't getting the fanfare in the offseason. I think we'll see those guys get squeezed out a little bit in favor of Kincaid in the mid-range and then Deontay Hardy at $200 And what that will do is it'll just push even more ownership to the top end with Stephon Diggs and with Aaron Rodgers and with Josh Allen and Garrett Wilson, who we'll get to in a second. So this is kind of where I like to try and attack just as a GPP bro, trying to find those tail outcomes with guys like Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox. Hopefully Dawson Knox can run into a touchdown. Maybe Gabe Davis can find a way to get behind this stout Jets secondary. But I think those are the two favorite when I think about where ownership's actually going to fall in some of the small field tournaments that I'm playing. I think Davis and Knox are my two favorite from a GPP perspective, but not to skip too quickly over Deontay Hardy. I think based off of everything that we learned in the offseason, I think he's probably safe for cash games, even with some of the question marks that we have.
Yeah. I mean, he's not going to play a ton. I don't think he's not going to see a huge volume of targets, but like 3 or 4 targets to Deontay Hardy at 200, I think is very much in the meaty range of outcomes. On the other side, if somebody wanted to tell me that they like Garrett Wilson more than Steph Diggs in this game, I'd be like, okay, that's totally fine. I have no problem with that take whatsoever. The target competition is so weak. And I know that Lazard and Cobb are Rodgers boys. He's doing mushrooms with them or whatever. I mean, Garrett Wilson is the straight baller with very, very limited target competition, as you see here, and a much, much, much better matchup than what Steph Diggs has. So if you want to tell me that Garrett Wilson's going to have a bigger game than Steph Diggs tonight, I am not against that take whatsoever. Gary, any thoughts on handling Garrett Wilson and all the other Jets pass catchers tonight?
Yeah, I don't think Wilson's captain ownership is that bad, right? Like if you want to make an argument that you want one Jet in your captain spot, and we talk about this a lot, like the wide receiver one can get there without their quarterback, right? We talked about this with Amon-Ra the other day in the Lions game, a little bit with CeeDee Lamb last night. I think it definitely stands true with Garrett Wilson and the traditional pocket passer that Aaron Rodgers is. I think he'd be my favorite of these guys if I'm trying to force up a high ceiling Jets captain. So no issues whatsoever. And I agree with you. You can easily make the argument that Wilson is the top overall skill position player you want in this game. We know he's a baller. Saw the stuff at Hard Knocks in preseason, and Aaron Rodgers starting to fall in love with him. So no issues whatsoever. I think total ownership, somewhat efficient if you want to take a big stand. Totally understand and would have no issues with that whatsoever. It's these other guys that become kind of interesting, right? Alan Lazard, and I know Cody mentioned it in his article, kind of falling through the cracks here, right? Should be on the field, all 2 receiver sets. They give him a contract. We know he's Rodgers' boy. I think he's just okay at football, but guy that has a nose for the end zone, decent possession receiver, a lot of attention going Wilson's way, and his price seems fine. So he's definitely an interesting name at total ownership here.
I did want to mention Mecole Hardman, who we think is behind Randall Cobb for base work, but I do think that they will have a package for Mecole Hardman. Like, I don't think they're just going to completely ice out Mecole Hardman. I think he will play a decent amount, similar to the Kadarius Toney stuff. I know that did not work out, but Kadarius Toney did see 5 targets and they had like a gadget play run for him on the goal line, which got stuffed. I could see something like that from Mecole Hardman. John Paul says, why are we passing on Trent Sherfield? I'm not passing on Trent Sherfield, although I think Deontay Hardy is more likely to get those slot snaps. I think Trent Sherfield might actually be better. And then we saw games last year where Gabe and Steph Diggs rotated out some, and also in 4 wide receiver sets, we'll see Trent Sherfield also. So I'm certainly not passing over him.
Tournaments, give me Sherfield over Hardy tonight all day. I think there's a better chance at a touchdown there. I think Hardy's the cash game play for sure, but Sherfield is way more interesting to me for tournaments at ownership.
Agreed. I think that I like that take. Cody, I give you the floor for your daily or weekly or whatever it is, kicker and defense takes here. I would note, I'll check the weather again in a second here while you're talking, but there is some weather in the area, I believe.
Yeah, I think, again, the defenses are a little bit underpriced relative to their base projection. You see them kind of projecting right around the Randall Cobbs of the world, projecting a little bit better than some of the guys like Mecole Hardman, kind of in that range too. And I think it gets you onto a little bit of a different build if you go that direction. So I do like the defenses a little bit more than ownership would indicate tonight. Of course, the weather is interesting, and the Jets defense is elite. And I think that there's opportunities for turnovers. I think there's opportunities for sacks, and I do like that. As has been customary for the first 2 shows of the season, I think it's best to play defenses with at least 3 teammates. So, Bills in a 4-2 or Jets in a 2-4, I think makes the most sense. That's just generally how I think about that, and historically what has worked most often. And certainly in 5-1s and 1-5s, absolutely. And I tried to get there yesterday. You should absolutely, if you're using the solver, I think if you have the ability to, If you're doing those 5-player stacks, the solver gives you the option to boost certain players if a certain stack appears. I tried my hardest to get some Cowboys captain DST yesterday, a little bit in some 5-1 stacks, still couldn't get there, which is probably a good indicator that I shouldn't have gotten there. But I would certainly boost the captain DST in the 5-player stack that you're playing. It's historically worked out a ton. And generally that means the whole offense is eating. It didn't work quite to that degree last night, but Pollard got there at an expensive price tag. CeeDee Lamb played okay relative to everyone else who was priced around. So I think in those outcomes, you want the team's most expensive offensive players. And one way to get that is to play the cheaper defense at captain. And then back to the kickers. I think that including the kicker for the team and the quarterback you're playing, especially if they're at captain, makes a ton of sense. It just generally results in more scoring opportunities if the quarterback is playing well. So if I'm playing Josh Allen at captain, I have a little bit more interest in Tyler Bass, and same thing for Rodgers at captain. But I'm not really considering these guys at the captain position themselves.
Weather report for tonight. It is going to rain tonight, like 100% chance of rain. It's going to stop sometime between 6 and 7 p.m. The good news is there's like no wind. I mean, the wind is like completely dead. So
I mean, I'm 20 minutes from the stadium right now. It's beautiful out. I think it's going to rain shortly, and then I think we should be in the clear for game time.
Okay.
It might be wet, maybe a little wet, but I think active rain should be good.
All right. Let me refresh this here, and then we will go ahead and take as many questions as we can. We have about 5 minutes here. We'll take as many questions as we can, and then we will get to the flag plant portion of the program. Sammy says Captain Dalvin Cook in a single entry. Not the worst idea that I ever heard, especially if you think that Breece Hall is going to be very limited. Any thoughts on that one, Gary?
Yeah, I don't hate that. I think that's okay. I mean, again, we're projecting him as our top running back for the Jets. Again, I think for large field tournaments, I prefer kind of attacking the Breece side, but I think for a single entry 3 max, I would be totally okay with the Cook, what we perceive to be a higher floor. And we mentioned it all offseason, how it seems like this has been Aaron Rodgers' move to bring Dalvin Cook in. Would I be surprised at all to see him want to kind of develop that rapport early? You mentioned the check down stuff, how much he likes to get running backs involved. So I don't hate Dalvin at all.
Yeah. I mean, we only have 5% captain ownership on Dalvin. I think that's a fine play. Hunter says, do we need to play Aaron Rodgers in the flex if Garrett Wilson is the captain? I would think yes, but what do you think there, Cody? I don't think you have to, but I think it's probably winning.
Yeah, I'm glad this question got brought up because I ran 300 of our optimals in the solver just using our projections with a little bit of variance applied. And you can go in and select which player you want to look at and how often other players appear alongside that player. If you go in and do that, select Captain Wilson, you'll see that Rodgers appears in, depending on what amount of variance you're using, Rodgers will only appear in like 50 to 60% of those Wilson lineups. So I actually think because of the projection on Josh Allen, because of the projection on Stephon Diggs, you're going to see Garrett Wilson at captain without Rodgers actually be quite common. And I think what I want to do in those situations is boost it. I want to have much more of my Captain Wilson lineups be tied to Aaron Rodgers in the flex than not. So if you're using the solver, if you're just hand building, I would say more often than not, you probably want Rodgers in the flex.
Okay. All right. Is that a wet gym towel around Cody's neck, or is that his collar? Asking for the gym bros.
Yeah, I've got the collar popped right now. I am actually drinking my pre-workout, trying to keep the trying to keep the juices flowing, and then I'm going to the gym.
DK says Sherfield or Shakir. We have Sherfield getting more targets. It doesn't look great for Khalil Shakir tonight in terms of usage. As we saw yesterday, though, there can be weird things that happened. We liked Kieran Williams. We were taking Kieran Williams a ton around 18, 19, 20 late, but I never would have thought that Kieran Williams would actually play ahead of Cam Akers. And this is obviously a much more underreported one here, Sherfield versus Shakir. Again, we think Sherfield is ahead. All right. Let's go ahead and get to the flag plant portion of the program. I crashed and burned on the last show, so I do not get the honors. Gary, I'll go ahead and give you the honors first.
Yeah, last night, Cody and I both fell flat on our faces, both flag planting giant pass catching options. So 2 times ago, I did have David Montgomery. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting slate. I was really hoping that one of Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs would come in with a little less ownership. I'm still a little too scared of that outside passing. Davis' ownership seems efficient to me, but I do like this as like a secondary pass catching slate or maybe even tertiary. I'm going to go to the same take we've had all offseason, and even with a little bit more ownership on him than his new rookie compadre. Give me Dawson Knox here. I think you get the discount on Kincaid, slightly more ownership, but I think Cody mentioned kind of that 11.5, 12 personnel that they'll probably play tonight. The middle of the field should open up a little bit if the outside's taken up, and I do like the Jets to push a little bit or stay competitive or win. And I think that leaves that passing open, and we know Dawson Knox is a trusted target. Only 18% total. I think even if you're 150, you could sprinkle in 3 to 5% captain Dawson Knox. So I like him. Kincaid, I think we've seen kind of mixed things on the amount of routes run for him in preseason. We'll see what that looks like out of the gate, but I know Dawson Knox will be involved, and he's a trusted guy. I mentioned the pass rush as well. They trust him in blocking situations too. So.
Yes, the tight end showdown narrative. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, there has never been a showdown slate in which a tight end didn't catch at least 1 touchdown, let alone 3. Dawson Knox for Gary. Cody, go ahead.
Yeah, I am going to go to Gabe Davis at 7,200. As I'm looking at our ownership projections, there, of course, will be an update a little bit closer to lock. And I think one thing that stands out like a sore thumb is the field's not going to get there at 27.9% or 5% captain ownership. I think given the stars and scrubs nature of this field and the running backs that are priced directly around Gabe Davis, I think he's ultimately going to get squeezed out. That perimeter defense is no joke, and I don't want to understate how difficult that Jets matchup is. Gabe Davis can fail a ton in this spot, but I think when he does not fail, there are huge paths to upside with a 15.3 yard ADOT, 30-some% share of the team's air yards. If he can just come down with a couple of those, I think there are huge games in Gabe Davis's outcome. So I'm willing to eat some zeros, willing to look foolish, but I like Gabe Davis at 7,200 today.
All right. Oh no, Vince.
Good advice.
Just
throw it in there.
Throw it in there.
Vince. Yeah. I've done what Vince does, where I don't put it in the lotto. I think for Showdown, maybe it's a little bit different because if you have like the actual nuts in Showdown, it's like so valuable where, I'm never going to have the actual nuts on main slate for like a stone cold lotto. It's almost impossible. So, yeah. All right. I'm going to break the rules a little bit. I know this guy is going to be 50+% owned. My flag plan tonight, Garrett Wilson outscores Steph Diggs, runs circles around the rest of the Bills' options, consolidates targets to the tune of something 35% from Aaron Rodgers here, and just has an absolute breaking out party for both the Jets and Garrett Wilson himself on national television. I did pick the Jets to win this division. Did not feel great about it, but I do think that the Jets have a very, very, very good chance to be a good team this year, mostly on the back of their defense and just conservative, competent quarterback play from Aaron Rodgers. So for me, it's Garrett Wilson in all lineups tonight with a good mix of captain in there as well. Flag planting Garrett Wilson. You guys are going to make fun of me for flag planting someone that's over 50% owned. However, this is Showdown and I make the rules. That is what it is. All right. 4, Cody. 4, Gary. For producer Adam, I am indeed Adam. Good luck, everybody.